I'm 58 years old and have spent the last 30 years as a forest ranger in the Appalachian Mountains of West Virginia. I've seen bears, cougars, even wolves where they shouldn't exist. But what my trail camera recorded during 6 consecutive nights in September 2024 changed everything I thought I knew about these mountains. It wasn't an animal, it wasn't human. And when I finally decided to camp at that location to see with my own eyes, I discovered that some creatures don't want to be found. They choose who can see them. This is the story of how I became the only living person to document something that science insists doesn't exist. Before I continue, if you enjoy stories about unexplained mysteries and unknown creatures, leave your like and subscribe to the channel. This helps me bring more content like this, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next videos. My name is Thomas Brennan, and since 1994 I've worked as a forest ranger in the Monongahela National Reserve. It's over 370,000 hectares of dense forest, steep mountains, and deep valleys where very few people venture. My job has always been to monitor wildlife, prevent fires, help lost hikers. Quiet routine, predictable, until September 2024. I had installed 8 trail cameras at different points in the reserve for a study on deer population. Cameras with motion sensors, infrared night vision, programmed to photograph anything that passed in front of them. I checked the memory cards every week, always the same thing: deer, raccoons, occasionally a black bear. But on the morning of September 16th, when I reviewed the images from camera number 5, installed in a remote valley almost 15 kilometers from the nearest road, my stomach turned. The first photo was from September 11th, 3:47 in the morning. It showed something standing between 2 trees, about 8 meters from the camera. The infrared image rendered everything in shades of white and gray, but the shape was unmistakable. Bipedal, upright, at least 2.5 meters tall, shoulders too broad to be human, long arms hanging at the sides of the body, and the face, my God, the face was looking directly at the camera. My first reaction was skepticism. 30 years in the forest and you see many pranks, branches that look like faces, rocks that look like animals. It was probably a trunk, shadows creating illusion. But then I saw the second photo, taken 2 seconds later. The figure had moved. It was closer, leaning forward, as if examining the camera. I continued scrolling through the images. 12 photos in total that night. The creature circled the camera, touched the trunk of the tree where it was attached, even crouched in front of it for almost a minute, face just meters from the lens. In one of the photos, you could see the eyes reflecting the infrared light, 2 bright points fixed on the camera. I took a deep breath. It had to be a bear. Bears stand up, especially when curious. But the arms were wrong. The proportions were wrong, and bears don't examine technological equipment with this kind of deliberate curiosity. I went to the photos from the next night, September 12th. The creature returned. 2:53 in the morning, 31 photos this time, and now it wasn't alone. There were 2 figures, the larger one, which I had seen before, and a smaller one, maybe 1.80 meters, more slender. They moved together, coordinated, the larger always between the smaller and the camera. Protective behavior, like a father and son. I felt my heart race. This couldn't be happening. It wasn't real. Night 3. September 13th, they came back again, 47 photos. Now they were doing something different. The larger creature placed something in front of the camera, branches arranged in a kind of pattern, not random, deliberate, like an arrow pointing south, toward the deeper valley. Night 4, night 5, night 6. Every night they appeared, always between 2 and 4 in the morning, always performing behaviors that seemed intentional, intelligent. On the 6th night, the larger creature left something new in front of the camera. Stacked rocks, 4 of them, perfectly balanced one on top of the other. In total, more than 200 photos over 6 nights. Documentation that, if real, would change everything we know about North American wildlife. I spent 3 days analyzing the images. I enlarged every pixel, looked for signs of digital editing, inconsistencies, anything that indicated fraud. But the camera was intact, sealed, with no evidence of tampering. The memory card was original, never removed since I installed it, and I was the only person who knew where that camera was. I showed the photos to my supervisor, Marcus Webb, a practical man who had spent 40 years in the reserve. "Thomas, that's a bear," he said immediately. "Look at the size. It has to be a grizzly bear. We don't have grizzly bears in Monongahela, Marcus. You know that. Then it's a very large black bear, or someone in a costume playing a prank. 15 kilometers into the forest for 6 straight nights at the same hours." Marcus fell silent, studying the images. Finally, he sighed. "What do you want to do?" "I want to go there, camp, see with my own eyes." "Thomas, if this is real, if it's what you think it is, it could be dangerous. That's why I'm going alone. I won't put anyone else at risk." Marcus looked at me for a long moment. "Be careful. And Thomas, if you find something, don't try to interact. Just document and get out of there." On September 20th, I loaded my backpack with supplies for 5 days. Lightweight tent, sleeping bag, dehydrated food, water purifier, first aid kit. I also took 3 additional cameras, night vision binoculars, audio recorder and my .30 caliber rifle. Not because I planned to use it, but because 30 years in the forest taught me it's better to have it and not need it. The hike to the valley took 6 hours. The terrain was difficult. Steep slopes, streams to cross, dense vegetation. The deeper I went, the more the forest changed. The trees became larger, older. Oaks and hickories with trunks so thick that 3 people couldn't hug them. Moss hanging from branches like green curtains. A heavy silence that made each step sound amplified. I found the original camera at 3 in the afternoon. It was still there, attached to the trunk of a giant hemlock. I checked around. The stacked rocks were still in front of the camera, the branches arranged in a pattern too. No one had been here since the last photo. I set up camp 50 meters from the camera on a small elevated plateau with good visibility of the valley. I installed my additional cameras at different angles, set up the audio recorder to capture continuous sounds, prepared the night vision binoculars. Then I waited. The first night was quiet, too quiet. Normally, the forest at night is full of sounds, owls, crickets, small mammals moving through vegetation. But here, after the sunset, the silence was almost oppressive, as if the forest was holding its breath. I stayed awake until 5 in the morning. Nothing, no movement, no unusual sounds, just darkness and silence. The second night was the same. I began to wonder if I had wasted my time. Maybe the creatures had noticed that the area was different, that something had changed. Maybe they would never come back. On the third night, everything changed. It was 2:27 in the morning when I heard the first sound, a branch snap. Clear, coming from the south. I grabbed the night vision binoculars, watching the ghostly green darkness through the lenses. At first I saw nothing, then movement. Between the trees, maybe 100 meters away, something large was moving. Not with the clumsy gait of a bear, but with deliberate, careful steps, bipedal. My heart started pounding. I held the binoculars with both hands to avoid shaking. The figure was approaching, stopping frequently, as if assessing the environment. It came closer. 60 meters, 40, 30, and then it stepped out of the shadows into a small clearing illuminated by the faint moon. Everything I had seen in the photos was real. The creature was at least 2.5 meters tall, maybe more, covered in dark fur, reddish-brown under the moonlight. Massive shoulders, broad chest, arms that reached below the knees. The legs were powerful, muscular, adapted for mountainous terrain. But it was the face that left me paralyzed. It wasn't an ape face. It wasn't human. It was something in between. The nose was flattened, wide, the forehead prominent but not exaggerated. The eyes, God, the eyes were large, dark, and even at a distance, I could see they were focused, alert, intelligent. The creature stopped in the clearing, slowly turning its head from side to side, smelling the air, listening. I barely dared to breathe. Then it looked directly at me. I was hidden behind a fallen log, 20 meters away, motionless, but somehow it knew I was there. Our eyes met through the night vision binoculars. For 3 seconds, that seemed like eternity, we simply observed each other. Then it did something I will never forget. It raised one hand, enormous, with long, thick fingers, and placed it over its chest, then pointed at me, then at the ground between us. It was a gesture, A communication. It was saying something. I slowly lowered the binoculars, maintaining eye contact. I placed my hand over my own chest, imitating its gesture, then pointed at it, then at the ground. The creature tilted its head slightly, almost like a nod. Then it turned and began walking south toward the deeper valley. After a few steps, it stopped and looked back at me. It wanted me to follow. Every survival instinct screamed for me to stay put. But 30 years as a naturalist, as someone dedicated to understanding wildlife, pulled me forward. This was an opportunity that would never repeat itself. I grabbed my camera and followed. The creature maintained a steady pace, always checking if I was keeping up. Not too fast, but steady. We descended deeper into the valley, along invisible trails that only it knew. The vegetation became denser, the trees older. We were entering a part of the reserve where perhaps no human had stepped in decades. After 40 minutes of walking, we arrived at an area that left me breathless. A natural grotto formed by giant moss-covered rocks, with an opening of maybe 3 meters high. The creature stopped at the entrance, looked at me one more time and entered. I hesitated. Entering a dark cave following an unknown creature was possibly the most unwise decision I could make, but I had already come so far. I turned on the camera light and entered. The grotto was larger inside than it appeared, maybe 6 meters deep, with a ceiling high enough for the creature to stand comfortably. The floor was covered with dry leaves, soft moss, and in the back, I saw something that made me stop. There was another creature, smaller, maybe 1.70 meters, lying on a pile of leaves. It was injured, I could tell by the way it held its left arm against its body. The creature I had followed approached it, making soft, comforting sounds that seemed like language. The injured creature was female, I realized. It had slightly different features, a slightly thinner face, less massive body, and she was looking at me with fear in her eyes. The male, because now I was certain it was male, positioned himself between me and the female, protective but not threatening. He made another gesture, pointing at the female, then at her arm, then at me. He wanted me to help. My God, I thought, he brought me here because she's injured. Slowly, very slowly, I lowered my camera and raised both hands, palms open. Universal gesture of peace. I took a step forward. The male didn't move. Another step. He watched my every movement with intense attention. When I got close enough, I knelt. I was at her height. The female looked at me with eyes that had as much emotion as any person's. Fear, pain, uncertainty, but also something that seemed like hope. "Can I see?" I asked quietly, pointing at her arm. She hesitated, then slowly extended her arm. I illuminated carefully. The forearm was swollen, with a deep laceration that looked infected, probably from a fall or encounter with something sharp. Without treatment, the infection could spread. "I have medical supplies at my camp," I said, knowing they didn't understand the words, but maybe the tone. "I can help, but I need to go back and get them." The male made a low sound, then gestured toward the grotto entrance. He understood. He was giving me permission to go and return. I stood up, keeping movements calm. I left the grotto and practically ran back to camp. The sky was already beginning to lighten. It was almost 5 in the morning. I grabbed my complete first aid kit, clean water, antibiotic ointment, bandages. I also grabbed extra food, protein bars, dried fruits. I didn't know if they would accept them, but it was worth trying. I returned to the grotto when the sun was rising. The 2 creatures were still there. The male met me at the entrance, examined what I was carrying, then let me pass. For the next hour, I cleaned the female's wound as best I could. She never complained, even when the process clearly hurt. She just squeezed her eyes shut, breathed deeply. The male stayed by her side the whole time, holding her free hand with his. A hand that could easily crush bones, but that held with infinite delicacy. When I finished the bandage, I offered water. She drank. I offered a protein bar. She smelled it, then ate slowly, cautiously. The male took one too, examined it, then ate. I sat leaning against the grotto wall, exhausted, trying to process what was happening. Here I was, inside a cave, providing first aid to creatures that science said didn't exist. Creatures that showed complex social behavior, problem-solving ability, even interspecies help-seeking. The male approached me. He sat, his eyes at the same height as mine. He placed his hand on his chest again, then pointed at the female. then at me. Gratitude. He was thanking me. I placed my hand on my own chest too. "You're welcome," I said. We spent the rest of that day in the grotto. They didn't seem in a hurry to send me away, and I was too fascinated to leave. I observed how they interacted, the tenderness between them, the sounds they made to each other. It wasn't human language, but it was definitely communication. There were different tones, different patterns. When the male found wild berries near the grotto, he brought them to her first, making sure she ate before him. Behavior that spoke of bonding, of care. In the afternoon, I began to notice more details. Their hands were incredibly skilled, long fingers that could manipulate small objects with precision. The feet were different from ours, wider, with toes that could grip, perfect for rocky terrain. The fur was dense, natural insulation for cold mountains, and the eyes, those eyes that demonstrated so much awareness, so much presence. When night fell again, the female was clearly better. The fever had gone down, she moved with less pain. The male made a soft sound, then gestured toward the entrance. It was time for me to go. I understood. I collected my supplies, but left extra bandages and antibiotic ointment. I showed the male how to apply it, using exaggerated gestures. He watched attentively, then imitated my movements. He understood. Before leaving, the female did something surprising. She extended her hand to me. I looked at the male, who nodded. I held her hand. Enormous, warm, covered with soft fur. She squeezed gently, then released. "Goodbye," I said. "Take care." The male accompanied me back through the valley to closer to my camp. At the edge of the clearing, he stopped. He looked at me for a long moment, then made a final gesture. He placed his index finger on his lips, a human gesture, a gesture he must have learned by observing people from afar. Silence, secret. "I understand," I said. "No one will know. You have my word." He looked into my eyes as if measuring my sincerity, then nodded once and disappeared into the forest without making a sound. I returned to my camp in a state of shock. I reviewed the footage from the cameras I had left running. They captured my departure, but didn't capture my return with the creatures. I had turned everything off before following the male. The only evidence I had were the photos from the original camera and my own memories. During the next 2 days, I remained at camp. The creatures didn't return. The original camera recorded nothing more. They had moved farther away, to more remote parts of the reserve, where they would be safe, where they could live without interference. When I returned to the reserve base on September 25th, Marcus asked me what I had found. "Bears," I said. "Definitely bears. The camera caught bears." He looked at me with skepticism. "You spent 5 days out there to confirm bears." The camera angles were deceiving. Up close it was clear. Just large black bears. Marcus didn't seem convinced, but didn't insist. "You look different, Thomas. What really happened out there?" I learned that some things are more important than proving we're right. Some creatures deserve to be left alone. I deleted all the camera photos except 3, which I kept on an encrypted flash drive that I keep hidden. Enough to remind me it wasn't a hallucination, but not enough to convince anyone if I tried. Because here's the truth I learned in those mountains. There are things in this world that exist on the borders between the known and unknown. Creatures that survived by learning to hide, to avoid, to remain myth. And when one of them chooses to trust you, when it allows you to see its vulnerability, its love for its family, its capacity to ask for help, you don't betray that trust. I've returned to that valley 3 times since September. I always leave medical supplies in a waterproof backpack hidden near the grotto. Fruits, nuts, non-perishable things. The backpack is always empty when I return. Sometimes I find stacked rocks near it. 3 rocks, always 3. I think it's their way of saying thank you. I never saw the couple in person again, but sometimes, on very quiet nights, when I'm patrolling the most remote parts of the reserve, I hear distant sound, vocalizations that don't belong to any catalogued animal, echoes of a species that learned long ago that survival means invisibility. Marcus retired last year. I have 2 years until my own retirement. When I leave, I'll destroy the 3 photos I kept. I'll ensure that the coordinates of that valley remain unmarked on any map. And I'll take with me the memory of those intelligent eyes, those gentle hands, that silent trust. Because some discoveries aren't made to be shared. Some truths serve the world better remaining mysteries. And some creatures have earned the right to exist in peace, hidden in the last wild forests, where human curiosity hasn't yet reached. I know they'll call me crazy if I tell this story publicly. They'll say I made it all up, that the photos are fake, that I spent too much time alone in the mountains, and that's okay. Let them think that, because I know the truth. I know that in the deep folds of the Appalachian Mountains, where maps still have blank spaces and trees are 300 years old, there is a family, there is intelligence, there is gentleness, there is something that shares more with us than science is ready to accept. And as long as I live, I'll ensure they continue to have a guardian, someone who keeps the secret, someone who diverts the curious, someone who leaves medical supplies and food when needed. One day, perhaps long after I'm gone, someone will find them, with drones, with satellite technology, with enough determination, and when that day comes, I hope they're treated with the dignity they deserve, not as specimens, not as attractions, but as what they are, a species as old as the mountains, as intelligent as us, as deserving of respect, protection, and peace. Until then, the valley remains untouched on my maps. The grotto remains unmarked, and the creatures who entrusted me with their greatest vulnerability remain safe, hidden in the last refuge this world still offers. Some stories don't have definitive endings, some questions don't need answers, and some secrets are more valuable kept than revealed. This is my secret, and I'll take it to the grave. But every time I climb those mountains, every time I find rocks stacked in groups of 3, every time I hear those distant sounds echoing through the valleys, I smile, because I know I'm not alone in these ancient forests, and neither are they.